our belief is that, these things should be simple, mechanical, and bomb-proof. They're a scooter that's designed for, anywhere from the average avid diver, either in, high current or cave diving situations.
Off-Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. Richard Kelch became certified with his wife after moving to a new city to create new friendships. Eventually, he joined a dive club to enjoy and spend more time underwater. With his local diving in the Great Lakes, it was only a matter of time before he discovered his love for wreck diving. As the wrecks became deeper, he would find himself moving into higher levels of training. After receiving a phone call one Sunday evening, he would find himself becoming co-owner along with friend Greg Hilliard of Subsea Propulsion Systems. Please enjoy. Richard, how are you doing this morning?
I'm well. It's kind of snowy outside for a March day, but I'm good. It's 8 a.m. here. What time is it where you are?
It is, I'm exactly 12 hours ahead, so it is 8 p.m. Yeah, and it's generally pretty warm where I am at. And where exactly are you located again?
I'm in southern Ontario, so I'm in a city called Sarnia, which is at the very bottom end of Lake Huron. We're blessed to live right on the shore of the Great Lakes.
Oh, okay. So I'm just gonna throw it out there and say the cold weather doesn't bother you that much.
I like it less and less every year. Let's put it that way. This, there's that saying, March, comes in like a lamb, goes out like a lion, or in like a lion, out like a lamb. It's definitely came in like a lamb this year and is going out like a lion. We've had a very mild winter, and there's a lot of people who think that, wow, spring is here, and we're like, it's still going to get some snow, still going to get some winter. So.
Yeah. I was going to say March is usually, so I used to live in cold weather environments, and March is usually kind of when it starts really hitting sometimes. And yeah, I did the cold. I grew up in New Hampshire, and then I moved to Colorado. So I was kind of chasing the winters, and then I think it was about my early 30s. I was like, I just, that warm weather starts sounding a little bit more appealing. So.
Yeah, it definitely over the years, the winters have gotten milder. And, back when we were early in diving, we were so gung ho that we felt like we had to get in the water every month of the year. So even if it meant, getting into a spot where it hadn't frozen up for a half an hour dive just to say we went diving, was great. Now it's like, I'll drive 20 hours to Florida to do the same thing rather than, or get on a plane and go somewhere warmer than do that. Screw that. It's cold. I can be cold anytime I want.
Well, speaking of diving, tell me about your journey into the scuba world. Tell me about that first breath underwater. What led to that moment? Was it love at first breath, or I hate this? Tell me all about it.
So this is actually all thanks to my wife, Fiona. We met in university, and when we first were married and had finished school, we were living in the city of London, Ontario. And she had, and I had as well, but she was, all her life had been passionate about wanting to try scuba diving. And we struggled when we first moved to that city socially to make new friends. And she saw an ad in the local newspaper advertising scuba diving lessons, and she said, let's go. So we did. We went, we started going on Sunday nights to the local YMCA. And it's interesting. I have two first memories of breathing underwater. And the first one is on day one, week one of the course. We did our classroom stuff. We moved down to the pool, did your first blush look at your equipment, put it on your back, standing in the shallow end of the pool with your mask off. They said, okay, now just put the regulator in your mouth and put your face in the water and take a breath. I did. I put my face in the water and I couldn't make myself breathe. And it was so foreign. And I wanted it so badly. I really wanted to think this is it. I've found my thing. And I was so frustrated that I wasn't a fish, that it didn't seem natural. Now, luckily enough, that feeling went away very quickly. And a few weeks later, I found myself in Tobermory, Ontario, doing a checkout in May in a very ill-fitting rental wetsuit that I tried to stuff some sweatshirts underneath to fill up some of the bulk because I was, skinny back then. It was a May day with a sun just beaming down, so I remember feeling like my body from the neck down was absolutely an ice block, and my head, which was up in the sun with a hood on, was just about to explode from the sun beating down on it. And we dropped down, did our skills over the next day and a half, 2 days, did our requisite 6 dives. And as I drove away with a friend to go back home, I remember thinking to myself, well, that's cool. I know how to scuba dive now. I have absolutely no idea how to go diving. And it just kind of befuddled me. Like, how do you know? We live on the Great Lakes. There's shoreline everywhere. How do you know to go in here versus there? How do you know that there's a boat here and not one there? And so we joined a local dive club. And from that point on, it was a very active club with over 100 members that ran trips, from probably, the beginning of mid-May to the end of October in Canada. Almost every weekend there was a trip going on with experienced divers leading and organizing. So we signed up, we did that. We took a couple of more NAUI courses to become, a NAUI Advanced. Back then, the NAUI Advanced course was like 18 or 19 dives. It was a 9-month course, but, through the winter and all summer long of, doing everything from different types of drift dives to salvage to navigation, and all these things. So we pursued that. And then again, through some people who were, more socially connected at bringing groups together, we sort of slowly coalesced into a tighter friend network of divers and like-minded people who were looking for something a little more challenging, a little more skill developing. And that's how we ended up getting in a vehicle and driving down to Florida and saying, well, let's try this, this cavern and cave dive course. And, it's going to make us better cave divers, better divers, better wreck divers. It's going to push our skills. It was sort of like, well, that's where the cutting edge is. And I read Chuck Exley's books, and I thought, okay, these are the guys who are, they invented this stuff. Let's go train where these guys are. And we were fortunate enough to meet some really, really excellent instructors. And like everybody else, goes down to cave country to get, better skills, thinking, oh no, I don't want to go into holes in the ground. That's not my thing. And then, you go into the hole in the ground and you go, wow, yeah, this is amazing. I want to do more of this. So yeah, so that, pursued that, got my full cave certification in 1994. And then there was some wrecks in the lakes that we wanted to dive that we knew were, we had pushed the limit on what we could do on air, probably pushed way beyond the limit of what we should have done on air, lived to tell. And we went back down and we trained in some trimix, some mixed gas diving so that we could dive some of these wrecks in the lakes that were, beyond the 200-foot range, more safely. And, we had the good fortune to be able to be on some of these wrecks, like the Gunnell, the Judge Hart, some of the wrecks in the Whitefish Bay area and Lake Superior back in the early 90s and mid to late 90s, sorry. And then basically for me, diving, my wife and I have continued to dive avidly, and we love all aspects of it. I still like to just go down to the islands and throw on a single tank and look at pretty fish and take pictures. And I like the challenge of finding something that, other people haven't seen. In the early 2000s, I sort of work commitments and family commitments sort of reined me back. And I came to the realization that if I couldn't dive avidly in the extended range thing on a regular basis, I probably shouldn't be doing this if I wasn't going to dive it all the time. I didn't have the time to be diving, every other weekend at that level. So I took a giant step back, and we became what we called fluffy divers, where we went down and looked at the fish. We were fortunate to do that maybe once a year. And then about 8 years ago, my boys who are both divers. My eldest son spent some time as a dive instructor. They were working in Canada in the dive industry, and I started diving, in the lakes again a little more, and realized that I missed this. I need to get back. So reconnected with some of my old dive buddies, and at that point they had all moved on to closed circuit. And I realized, okay, if I'm going to do this is the future, and became closed circuit trained about 5 years ago, and have never looked back. So that in a nutshell is the journey. Yeah.
What unit do you dive on now?
Right now I'm diving on a Meg 15. My wife has decided that she wants to go CCR as well. So we're going to go do a training on a chest mounted unit in June down in Florida. The first few times I saw people with them, I thought, well, that is the goofiest looking thing I've ever seen. But now that I look at it from the standpoint of being able to travel, there's places that you want to go where hauling a Meg is, that's a check piece of luggage right there. I know you can get them into a carry-on possibly, but it's a beast to haul around. So we're gonna do a crossover onto both Choptima and a GBM and sort of see which way it suits us, and just lighter and smaller and more compact. I'll probably still always dive the Meg for now up here, but the ability to say, okay, we want to go down and, maybe do some cave diving in Mexico, maybe go to Truck Lagoon, do something like that and not have to haul, this massive rebreather everywhere. I'm intrigued to try it and see if it works for us.
Yeah, and to be honest, it seems the chest mount rebreathers are kind of popping up a lot over different companies. And I actually had a chance to try the Choptima in December of last year, and it is a really small, compact unit. And I know there's a few others. Any thoughts on the new Halcyon one? I know that kind of hit the scene with a big buzz. I don't know if you know anything much about it, but
I haven't really. I tried to dig up a little bit of information. I saw that they announced it in Germany, and obviously anything that Halcyon makes is usually great quality. But I haven't actually had a chance to put hands on one and see. The other one that we're going to try is the GBM. Again, going a totally different. No solenoid, just the needle valve. I like the idea of the mechanical control. Sort of the same idea as the Fathom and the Gemini, and in a way they're the constant mass flow orifice of a Revo, just tunable. So I'm intrigued to try that as well. So I'm really looking forward to sort of seeing both and just seeing the pros and cons of both.
And I actually just had a question. I'd like to bring it back just a tiny bit. So because I'm always kind of curious to hear about people's progression, especially, I want to say in the early days when you're talking about deep air, and then you made that transition to go into mixed gas. Because how was that transition for you? Because I know in the earlier days, it was kind of, I don't want to say taboo, but a lot of people were like, oh, deep air. What pushed you and progressed you to go into mixed gas diving? Was that just kind of hooking up with some Florida folks who were doing it, or what prompted that?
Pure terror, basically. We were young and foolish, and what we were doing is we would, just about every other weekend we'd go diving, and we'd start off with a Friday night dive on a wreck about 100 feet deep. It's a popular wreck during the daytime. We'd go out and do it at night every Friday night, and then on Saturday we'd generally go out to this wall area, and we were, I gotta say, we were probably pushing, between 200 and 240 feet on air. And oh yeah. And when you get down, below there, and every exhaust bubble sounds like the TIE fighter scene from Star Wars, you start to realize, okay, that's not right. I really am not safe here. And for me, some people get blissful. I got paranoid. Tunnel vision and paranoia, and I realized that, okay, this is not right. There's got to be another way. Like, how are these guys doing these dives and not feeling this way? And so we reconnected with Larry Green and Jared Jablonski, who had trained us in cave diving, and went down and we did the mixed gas training with them, with the idea that, okay, we have a couple of specific wrecks in mind that there was, say, a core group of about 6 or 8 of us that we wanted to do. And, we can't do this any other way. It's the only way to do it. And it's interesting to see the progression, because back then the idea was, well, you put enough helium in your mix to take the edge off the narcosis. So your equivalent narcotic depth might be, 120 or 140 feet, because we were all afraid, well, you use helium, you're going to get bent. You're going to get bent. And, I think the science has progressed now. Use the helium you need. Don't be afraid of it. You load it faster, you offload it faster. It obviously changes your decompression obligation to make it hit you sooner, but it's so much more efficient. It's so much cleaner for your body than to load this, this bigger nitrogen molecule into everything. And I definitely can say, I rarely rarely would use air anymore for anything, any kind of diving, anywhere. It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah. And so when you do the fun diving in the islands, trying to do nitrox?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, purely from an investment standpoint too, you've taken your week or 10 days off from work. Most people doing this, we still have day jobs, so you've taken your time, you've flown down, you've spent your money. I don't want to be cutting dives short because, the whole concept of decompression diving and, while you're looking at fish is just taboo. Even though, none of them seem to want to understand that it doesn't matter. Every time you go down, you're decompressing. You just don't have a ceiling. And, but that mandatory stop just throws everyone into a tizzy. So being able to use nitrox and stay longer, see more, get more out of your dives is, to me, and feel better. As I get older, I know it's not scientific, but I will swear that I feel better on nitrox, less fatigue, less silent DCS symptoms.
Just curious. So when you went and did your cave training, was that with Terry? Because I know he trained with Jared too.
Sure was, yeah. You know how there's social theories. There's people who are sort of mavens that are Malcolm Gladwell talks about social mavens, and they're the people who connect other people. Terry and another couple of people that I've had the pleasure of diving with over the last 30 years are those kinds of people where they're connectors, and they find us non-connectors and put groups together, put teams together. And I've had the great privilege of being, part of that group on and off. When I stepped back, when our children were little and, work was insane, Terry kept diving. So he's the guy who sort of pushed me to, you got to go CCR. Now we look back and we say, I can't believe we did some of that stuff on open circuit. I just can't believe we did it. And it was a lot harder when we were younger. But, now that we're all pushing our 60s, I just tell people now, like, just make the leap, go. You're gonna want to do this.
So it is something that I've been looking into this year, and I'll even say right now that I did actually purchase a unit. I'm headed to Mexico later in the year, about like 2 months, to go and train on a unit. I did go kind of the different route than a lot of people do, but because I know a lot of people will start with a back mount, or even these days, I guess, a chest mount, but I went with the side mount unit, the Fathom Gemini, actually.
Yeah.
So is the one that I got.
Yeah, and I think you'll be really happy with that. And if it wasn't for wanting to, have something that I could just sort of strap on to my chest, that sounded really weird. But something that I could attach to my chest and use, down in the islands. Because I've been fascinated for the last few years of like, okay, what could I get from a fish, video and photography standpoint if I was silent? And it hit me even on my Mod 1, in Blue Grotto in Florida. And there's not a lot of fish in there, but there are a few swimming around. You're silent and they're swimming right up to your mask. They're just curious. They're not afraid. The noise of diving is what drives the sea life to go hide. Again, the older I get, the slower I move underwater. And I'm quite content when I do go somewhere warm just to relax and get in the water, to find a patch of coral and just hover around and wait for all the little critters to come out and look at you. And so I'm thinking, well, if it was silent, but it's not worth the effort to haul a big back-mounted rebreather to do that. It's too much, and with bailouts and all that sort of stuff. But geez, these chest mounts, you could clip it on the front, have a single 80 on the back, and you could be diving in minutes. So I'm intrigued to try it. Hopefully the experiment's going to work out, and I do think that more and more places are going to become quote unquote breather friendly, not just the Mexico caves. So.
Yeah, and to be honest, so that the one of the biggest reasons why I chose the Gemini, it is a fairly travel friendly unit. Obviously, the chest mount ones are very travel friendly, right. But for me, I'm pretty, I'm in Malaysia, so pretty much if I'm diving, I have to hop on a plane, and there's a lot of different places in Asia, and I'm like, okay, I need something that I can throw on the plane, and I know that JJ is a super popular unit, the Meg also, but I'm like, that's a whole nother check bag that I have to deal with when traveling. So
it is. Well, and up here in Canada, we're obviously diving in a lot more thermal protection. The bulk and the weight of doing that is almost welcome. When you're diving in water that 34 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, you got a lot of thermal protection on.
Yeah.
So the mass of that rebreather is not is a benefit then versus the lighter and smaller and more compact.
And I'm always just kind of curious as to how people met. Do you remember when you first met Terry? Was it just kind of at a club meeting, a group dive?
Absolutely, I do. So there was an event in an area in Eastern Ontario called the Peterborough Ice Flow Races, and Peterborough is a small city, sort of northeast of Toronto, and there's a canal system that runs through there. And what would happen is the local dive club would host a midwinter sort of social fun event where on the Saturday night there would be a big party, and then on Sunday morning they would cut chunks of ice that were about 12 by 12, so 4 meters by 4 meters. And you would put a team of people in the water and with your wetsuit or dry suit and your fins on, and you would push the ice down the canal in a race. And so my wife and I showed up, to the hotel on the Saturday for the pre-race party, and Terry and his wife were in the room next door, and he came over to introduce himself, and he had a bottle of Crown Royal in his hand, and that was my wife's favorite rye as well. And she just took one look at it and said, "I'm going to like these people," and the rest is history. You start getting phone calls on a Friday afternoon saying, what are you doing Sunday? Let's go for a dive. And we started just doing things like, okay, let's get 2 aluminum tanks and let's strap them together somehow, and we'll figure out how to do this. And we were trying to just figure it out all on our own because, again, this is pre-internet, so you couldn't just Google how to put 2 tanks together. And nobody around us knew what they were doing. So, making reels and trying to jury rig everything from hardware parts. And then, when our first trip down to Florida, to go into a dive shop there, we were like kids in a candy store. And it's like, oh my God, somebody actually makes this stuff. Oh, somebody thought of how to do this. And it was just a total eye-popping experience.
Speaking of making stuff, tell me about Subsea Propulsion.
Great transition. Very smooth, Nick. Very smooth, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so basically, looking back over the years, all of us have had various different types of scooters, DPVs, dive propulsion vehicles, everything from, the old Arnold Jackson Predators to Tecna tow-behind scooters. For a long time, George Irvin was making the famous original Gavin. I remember when this upstart company came along and this guy was basically taking, the concept of a tow-behind like a Gavin and just, instead of, putting it together from pre-made parts, looking at the design and saying, well, I can make that better, and actually building it. And that was the start of Submerge. As obviously that, the Submerge sort of, went into a very, sort of dormant phase, and a lot of people thought that the company was never going to reemerge. About 16, 18 months ago, it was Terry and my now partner, Greg Hilliard. They were on their way back from a weekend of diving in the St. Lawrence River. And the phone rang, and it was the two of them on speakerphone, and they were like, hey, you got a minute? And I said, okay, yeah, it's Sunday night. And they said, we got a great idea. And usually nothing good comes out of those sorts of starts. And they're like, what do you think? And they said, let's buy Submerge. And I just sort of said, yeah, okay, whatever. And I'll think about it. Greg, I think, called me about 10 days later. He said, what'd you think about it? And then from there, we started just sort of, putting out some feelers and just to sort of see what was even, what the remnants of the company were. And we eventually managed to, to put together an offer that was accepted to purchase the remaining inventory and assets. And Greg pulled a covered trailer all the way down to Florida and back in one weekend by himself and loaded everything he could possibly get. We brought it back to Canada and started unpacking and looking at what we had, and threw it out there to the world that we had acquired the assets. We rebranded under the name Subsea Propulsion Systems. The design itself, things have, changed a little bit in the DPV world, but the basic design is still, in my humble opinion, the most robust and simply functional design out there. We've made some upgrades to the battery technology that we're putting into them, and we've relaunched the 2 classic models that Submerge used to make, the Viper and the Magnus, at sort of like a mid-range price point for people. And our belief is that, these things should be simple, mechanical, and bomb-proof. They're a scooter that's designed for, anywhere from the average avid diver, either in high current or cave diving situations. We do build deep exploration hulls that would be rated to go well beyond anyone's actual depth capabilities. And we're having a ball doing it. It's a cottage industry for us. Greg has a full-time job. I have a full-time job. He's the mechanical guy. I'm the administrative and face of the business. We're proud to be building these in North America and supplying them hopefully to the world.
Cool. And Greg, he does the talking tech.
He does, yeah. He's most people know him as Bender, the angry robot from Futurama. Greg is just one of those people who can visualize a technical problem and almost like see it in 3 dimensions in his head. I wish I had that ability when I was studying organic chemistry all those years ago. And he can look at a problem and just say, okay, this isn't working. We've got to do this. Sketch out something on paper and then go, machine a prototype, come up with a solution. He's fantastic at doing that. And we're very passionate about build quality. We're not a mass producer.
I just had a roundtable not too long ago with Terry, Bob, and Jeff. I met Captain Bob. I don't know if he goes by Bob or Captain Bob, but
the dude,
super nice guy. Yeah. But yeah, I'll have to reach out to Craig. It'd be awesome to have him on, just kind of full circle to have this group.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give him a heads up that you might be reaching out to him.
Jumping into, or diving in, no pun intended, how was there a lot of nerves going into this? Like, did you have like your day job? Is there a background in kind of what you were going, or was it like, let's just see what happens going into this, purchasing the business?
For me, 100% not. I'm a pharmacist by training. So I run an independent pharmacy, and I only semi-jokingly refer to Subsea as my side hustle. I'm close to retirement age from my full-time day job. And I'll probably then, go down to doing some locum work and just sort of, helping out, some friends when they need a day off sort of thing. But in my day job, I like to think of it this way: I've been a community pharmacist for 34 years. My job really is in communicating with people. When people come into us and they've got health related issues, especially, I'm 57 going on 58. So there's a lot of people in my demographic who are starting to face, health issues, and they become often, the way the health system in Canada works, they become often really reliant, when they develop, diabetes, heart disease, whatever, on a pharmacist. We become an information source. So in a way, my job is explaining and selling to people the concepts of why they should, take this medication that maybe they Googled and they don't think that they want to be on, or why they shouldn't do this or that, and coaching people through that sort of stuff. So where this fits in with Subsea for me is just more the information dissemination about, why do we build our scooters the way we do? What are our core beliefs in what a DPV should be? And I think of it as, a lot of people right now, like the marketing tends to be, all about, great, this new machine that maybe a little more compact, maybe a little faster. Everyone's big on range. This DPV X, Y, or Z will take you, 10,000 meters. Well, great. It's like the first time I took a rebreather course, the instructor said to me, he says, listen, I know that the minute you get certified on this thing, you're going to want to go to places, you're going to want to see how far you can take this. And so let's get you as prepared as possible to be able to deal with that. And then you'll need to take more courses. And with a DPV, the way I think we look at it, the scooters is it's one more tool, it's one more piece of equipment to achieve a task in a dive. We take very seriously the fact that these are pieces of equipment that could get somebody to some really amazing places, but can also get you into trouble, because at the end of the day, it's only as good as getting you home. It's kind of like your bailout on a rebreather and your ability to solve problems. You have to be able to get out. For 99.99% of us, this is a hobby and it's fun. And it's not our job. We're not getting paid to be there. Safety at the end of it all is paramount. And the ultimate measure of safety is, did you go home that night? So for us, it's like, our scooters have to be durable, reliable. And at the end of the day, we need to know that if someone buys something from us and they take it diving, when they come back to their scooter, let's say they've scootered and they've clipped off and they've swam, and then they've got to get home. They're going to hit that trigger and it's going to run. And it's going to do exactly what it needs to do. And we may not have, like you say, the most bells and whistles, but they work. And at the end of the day, simplicity. One of the reasons you chose a Gemini was it's simple.
Yeah.
Like there are definitely machines out there that have, way more advanced technology and, and bells and whistles and electronics, and they'll do all this for you. But you are the controller. I'm sure that's what partially attracted you to it was, it's a simple concept. For Greg and I, that's attractive. It's simple. It works. Don't screw with it.
question me, because I have not gone down the path of the DPVs yet. Why would one choose the Magnus over the Viper or vice versa?
The Magnus is the big brother to the Viper. There's a couple of different reasons. They have different motor technology in them. A Viper is built around an older electrical brushed motor, and a Magnus is a brushless motor. So picture what's in most of your rechargeable power tools these days are usually brushless motors. Now it changes the type of motor control for the speed on it. It allows us to use a continuously variable speed control because basically it changes the amount of current going to the motor, so the motor will spin faster or slower. Versus a brushed motor, it has basically a 3-speed gearbox on it so that you have 1, 2, 3 speeds. The brushed motors are tried and true technology in the scooter world forever. They're less costly, so the price point is a bit lower. And the other difference is, the Magnus just has a bigger capacity battery. So range and speed are bigger on it, but they also run a couple of $1,000s more. But as far as the build on them, the exterior of them is the same. The back end, the nose, and the body are all identical on those. And we're in beginning stages of development of sort of our motor of the future. What we're looking for is a more efficient motor. The more efficient the motor, then basically the better the range that we can get out because the less current it will draw because it's just more efficient. That's where we're at now. We're building the existing ones, and somewhere down the road, we're learning it's a long, slow process when it's a two-person company. Sourcing out, develop R&D on some of this stuff. We're little and we're cottage, but we have some ideas on how to make, the next generation be even more efficient. So.
Okay. What's a typical runtime on a scooter?
We generally expect that you can, on a Viper, you can get a solid 2 hours at just constant run. On a Magnus, you're looking at, the better part of 2:45. Most people don't exactly run, a scooter for like an hour straight. You're on and off the trigger all the time. But if you were to put it in the tank and run it at cruise speed on a Viper, we're generally getting over, 2 hours to 2.25 hours before the thing starts to die off. And then range, that's going to depend on, diver efficiency and load and that sort of thing. Obviously, if you're pulling, 3 bailout bottles in a back-mounted rebreather versus a nice streamlined set of doubles in a really good configuration, your speed and your range are going to be affected by how much force it's having to pull.
Okay. Yeah, it's something that is super appealing. I feel like the range that I'm in with diving, I'm not there yet, but once I kind of start progressing, I'm like, okay, I can see the appeal for scooters and DPVs, or I don't know if there's a proper name to call them.
Nah, I don't think it really matters. Yeah. So are you cave certified now, or are you?
No, that's actually, I'm headed down to Mexico in May to start that path. So I head back to Texas at the end of April. I'll be there for about a week, and then about 10 days, a little more than 10 days. And then I'm going to head to Mexico to start, the cavern intro, see where it goes from there. And then there's a person down there that trains on the Gemini. So I'm going to head down there, and I'm basically going to be there for about 8 weeks. And
nice.
I'm learning to learn, I'm going to get down there. Yeah. And then the goal is to make it back out here. And there's definitely some exploration going on in Indonesia. I don't think I'll be any part of the exploration. I mean, who knows? But just to be able to cave dive and check out the area around here. And then obviously there's deeper wrecks in the oceans out here. And I'm assuming that, you being where you're from, you're probably a pretty big wreck diver.
Yes. Yeah. So the wrecks are still fascinating for us. Things have changed in the last 30 years up here. When we first started diving in the lakes, it wasn't unusual to have visibility of 10, 15, 20 feet. So, like 3 to 8 meters. Diving today in most of the lakes, that would be like, I'm not even going to bother going. It's not good enough visibility. No, not joking. But that plus just the technology that you can get in $1,000 Garmin that you can put on a boat, it doesn't take, NOAA level technology to find wrecks. So some of the guys that are hunting for wrecks, they've built themselves some fairly significant investments in their side scanning. These guys are mostly like they're history buffs. They like to research a story and then narrow down an area, and they can go and map a bottom of the lake with homemade equipment that, you can put together with, and learn to use. And they're finding wrecks now that were, previously undiscovered. And a lot of them are just in that sweet spot beyond classic sport diving range. So, some of the wrecks that have been found in the last 7-8 years that are, anywhere between 140 and 200 feet deep, they're just covered in artifacts and history. And so the ability to see some of these things now is just amazing. And the closed circuit just extends the ability to do that with much greater safety. And obviously the cost of helium is just prohibitive to do it in open circuit. Greg and his wife Alicia have a couple of charter dive boats that they run in different areas of the Great Lakes, and I'm sort of their backup captain on the one boat just when they're double booked. And I always kind of giggle when I see someone on open circuit Trimix, because it's almost like you can see the dollar bills inside their bubbles as they hit the surface. It's just it's like a little cartoon going on there. And these have got to be $200 and $300 dives for these people, and I don't know how you do it.
That's actually a big reason why I started looking at rebreathers, was because I just last year I completed, kind of that one of the first classes most people would take, the advanced nitrox / decompression procedures course. Yep. And I started talking to my instructor about it, and I was like, that for me, I'm like, the next logical step would be open circuit, mixed gas. And he's like, I don't think you want to do that, because he's like, just go ask somebody the last time that they did an open circuit mixed gas dive. And most people will tell you it was when their class ended, and they just kind of jump right into the rebreather because it's just more economical. It's just a better path to go down these days, especially with prices. So
yeah, and I would argue the safety is leaps and bounds ahead. Like there's obviously different risks and complexities to going closed circuit, but really, the biggest thing you're going to learn, I think, is that the closed circuit buys you time, and time is everything, especially in an overhead environment. If something goes wrong on open circuit, your gas clock is ticking, because you're breathing with every breath. Versus on closed circuit, your ability to stop, calm down, solve problems, on a functional rebreather, it's not infinite, but it's orders of magnitude greater than on open circuit. And you have so many tools at your disposal by being on closed circuit. Once you get certified, and then just put your time in. It's like going back to when you're a beginning diver, and you just go and you just get in the water. You don't necessarily do anything, but you just refine those little skills and build that muscle memory. And I find, to this day, I'm certainly not a very proficient rebreather diver. I'm still learning with every dive, and I'm revisiting skills that are the most basic that I have to remind myself to know. Practice that till it becomes rote. You're going to love it. It's going to open your world. It really is.
Yeah, I'm excited. Obviously a little nervous, excited. I mean, anytime I go into a course, I try to have high expectations, but low expectations at the same time, so I can come out on the other end. But last couple questions for you before I let you go. I'm curious, as a family of divers, is it a family of wreck divers, or does your family kind of have certain things that they like to do? Like, does everybody go out to the wreck dive sites or what?
So right now, my youngest son is working and is broke, so he doesn't really dive too much anymore. We started them when they were 10 and 12 years old, and actually my two boys and two boys that belong to friends of ours and Terry's son, William, all certified together. So Terry actually certified my kids. And my eldest is, he did an undergrad, decided he wanted to take a year off, went down to the islands to work as a scuba instructor, and then COVID happened. So he spent his 1 year off, his gap year turned into 3 years, working in the dive business and captaining boats and doing that sort of stuff. And he's now back in law school, so he's broke again. He dives from time to time with us, and my wife and I, we just set up our own little dive boat in the last year or so. I would say I'm a passionate wreck diver. She is I'll go wreck diving, but I don't understand why you guys want to spend an hour looking at that. I'm good for 15 minutes and I'm out of here. And she's much more of a all-weather diver, but the critters are more her thing. So, her favorite place to dive would be off the northeast corner of Vancouver Island in the Pacific Northwest. The sea life is mind-blowing. We've been out a couple of times. We're going again in the fall, and it's cold for most people's taste. It's quite temperate for us, but I would say the water temperature is in the mid 50s. It's quite pleasant, but everything from little critters living on critters to giant Pacific octopus to sea lions to to orcas to everything around you, and it's wild and untouched, and it's hard to get to. So most people don't go there, and that is in a nutshell, I think what keeps us diving is just that sense of what's around the next corner, is so compelling to this day. And, what's under this rock, what's around that corner, what's inside this hole in this wreck, any of these things. It's like, that's what drives us to keep wanting to get in the water. Is just, you just never know what you're going to find, what you're going to see. And you and I, we're so privileged to be able to see these things, right? Most of the world, you've normalized it. I'm sure you think this is just normal what you do. And, your non-diving colleagues think you're nuts, but but no, this is just it becomes ingrained with your psyche of who you are.
Oh yeah, definitely. I completely agree. It's almost like weird thinking about not being a diver at this point, just because it's anytime I get in the water, it feels a lot more normal than breathing up here on the surface.
Yeah, we always say that's our happy place. You get in the water and you're immediately disconnected from. It's the closest thing to pure meditation that I can think of, is that you are so absorbed in your world for that hour or two that nothing else matters.
Oh yeah, and I could just even imagine being on a rebreather. It's probably even more because of how quiet, the silent world, as some people put it.
Just you and your breathing. Yeah.
And then my final question for you is, so someone that is looking into getting a DPV or taking that step into that course, what pieces of advice would you have for somebody going into a course or getting behind the trigger of a DPV for the first time, the do's, the do nots? What would you, obviously a do is buy a Subsea Propulsion.
Well, of course. But I would say, of course, I think, ours will do whatever anybody could want. I guess my biggest thing would be find an instructor, find a shop or a group that's got something, try a few, see what works for you. Look at also where you are in the world. Where's the support going to be? Obviously we're a small business out of Watford, Ontario, Canada. Our main market is North America. We can supply to the world, but if you're in Europe, obviously you may be better served by something that's built in Europe. That's one of the reasons I went with a Meg was, I looked at a bunch of different units and it ticked a lot of boxes, and there is no perfect rebreather, but one of the things was the fact that, support was only one time zone away. That to me was an important thing. So I would say, just get in the water, find someone who's, going to be able to do a bit of a demo in a nice confined water environment and just sort of get comfortable, and don't go to a DPV until you've got your basic skills under control. These are something you said you took, an advanced nitrox, beginning deco theory. You've probably already done some, good fundamentals courses to get you into good gear configuration, good trim. And all of that's essential before you start, getting pulled through the water at 200 or 300 feet a minute. You can't be a hot mess and getting pulled around.
Richard, I absolutely appreciate you coming on to the podcast today. This has been absolutely wonderful, and I hope you enjoy and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much. It was great chatting with you, and I look forward to listening to more of your podcasts.
Offgassing, a scuba podcast.